It begins in England, where a group of animal rights activists break into a medical research laboratory late at night to free chimpanzees used in experiments. A lab scientist forbids them from releasing the chimps, warning that they have been infected with a dangerous virus, but the activists ignore his advice. As soon as the chimps' cages are opened, one of the animals attacks and bites one of the activists. The contagion spreads instantly, turning the bitten activist into a frenzied, uncontrollable figure who then attacks everyone else in sight. In mere seconds, the infection cascades through blood contact, causing each victim to morph into a violent being. 28 days later, a bicycle courier named Jim awakens from a coma in an abandoned hospital. With no staff or patients anywhere, he wanders the empty corridors and eventually steps into silent, deserted London streets littered with signs of disaster. He calls out for help, yet no one answers. After walking far without encountering a single person, he enters a church and is horrified to find piles of corpses stacked everywhere. Among them are a few infected individuals who leap up to chase him. Jim flees outside, pursued by more infected figures, until two uninfected survivors rescue him. Their names are Selena and Mark. To aid in their getaway, Selena and Mark detonate explosives at a nearby gas pump and slip away, leading Jim to their temporary hideout. Inside this shelter, Jim briefly explains who he is. He says he was hit by a car while delivering packages, and after regaining consciousness, discovered that nobody remained in the hospital. Selena and Mark reveal that while Jim was in his coma, an extremely contagious virus rampaged through the population, causing the majority of people to become frenzied killers in a short period of time. All TV, radio, police, and military forces have seemingly collapsed, and it is possible the chaos extends far beyond the city, possibly on a global scale. Jim, they tell him, is the first uninfected person they have encountered in 6 days. Despite Selena and Mark advising otherwise, Jim insists on visiting his parents' home. The next day, the three go to the house. Tragically, Jim discovers that his mother and father have taken their own lives. Selena and Mark do their best to console him, and they decide to spend the night there. However, infected creatures soon burst in, forcing Mark to defend Jim. In the skirmish, Mark is wounded, and Selena sees that his arm has been bitten. Without a moment's hesitation, Selena uses a machete to kill Mark before the virus can fully claim him. Shocked, Jim leaves the house with her. While walking on empty streets, Selena clarifies that the infection is transmitted through contact with contaminated blood and transforms a person in seconds. She adds that if Jim ever becomes infected, she will kill him instantly. According to Selena, survival is their only goal. Caring too deeply about others, she believes, is dangerous and might get them both killed. They proceed through a deserted part of London. After nightfall, they notice twinkling Christmas lights on the upper floors of a high-rise block. Curious, they climb the stairs to investigate. Halfway up, Jim's strength wavers, likely from the burst of sugar in his system after consuming only soda during his recovery. They hear the roar of infected creatures at ground level, and these infected start chasing them up the stairwell. Suddenly, a man in tactical gear appears, guiding them into his apartment and dispatching the infected. This man is Frank, living with his teenage daughter, Hannah. Frank offers Jim and Selena a place to stay overnight. They accept, though Selena debates whether she and Jim should remain with Frank and Hannah. Jim believes Frank and Hannah are good people and does not want to leave them alone, but Selena worries that traveling with more people will slow everyone down and increase the risk of death. She warns Jim again not to become too attached. Regardless, they all settle in for the night. By morning, Frank points out that their resources, especially water, are nearly depleted. There has been no rain lately, rendering his rooftop water collectors empty. Frank plays them a recorded radio broadcast, apparently transmitted by soldiers near Manchester, claiming they have found the answer to infection. He says he needs help leaving the city, hoping the radio's promise of safety is real. After discussing it, Jim, Selena, Frank and Hannah decide to depart together in Frank's taxi to search for the blockade mentioned in the broadcast. During the drive, they begin bonding like a makeshift family. En route, they are forced to drive through a tunnel jammed with wrecked cars. The taxi's tire blows out, and they must stop to replace it. Suddenly, they hear the howls of a horde of infected racing toward them. In a panic, the four scramble to change the tire as quickly as possible. The instant they finish, the infected reach the taxi and clamber over it. Fortunately, Frank slams his foot on the accelerator, veering past them and emerging from the tunnel. Farther on, they spot an abandoned supermarket and decide to gather all the food and supplies they can, stocking up for the road ahead. They also find a tank of fuel, siphoning enough gas to continue on their journey. They stop for the night by a small lake, setting up camp. Before sleeping, Jim notices Selena carrying a pack of pills she uses to cope with anxiety and insomnia, offering them to Jim and Hannah as well. Frank declines the medication. At dawn, they resume traveling. Upon reaching the barricade outside Manchester, they discover it to be eerily deserted. Frank searches the area, convinced the soldiers must be there. Selena urges him to leave, but he refuses, angry and determined to find help. He then sees a flock of birds feeding on the decaying remains of an infected corpse overhead. He stands beneath it, and by ill fortune, a drop of tainted blood drips directly into his eye. Within seconds, Frank succumbs to the virus. Realizing what has happened, he orders Hannah to run. Selena yells at Jim to end Frank's suffering before it's too late. Just as Jim is about to act, a group of soldiers suddenly appears from hiding and shoots Frank. He dies instantly, leaving Hannah distraught. The soldiers seize Frank's taxi and take Jim, Selena, and Hannah to a fortified mansion under the command of Major Henry West. Hannah is in shock from her father's death, while Jim and Selena grieve the loss of their new friend. In a separate conversation, Major West shows Jim around the house, revealing that the soldiers have captured and chained up a newly infected comrade named Mailer in the courtyard. West explains that he wants to study the virus firsthand and observe how long it takes for an infected individual to starve to death. That night, a group of infected tries to assault the mansion, but the soldiers hold them off, guns blazing. However, one soldier tries to harass Selena. Jim intervenes, and Major West steps in to order everyone back to their duties, instructing them to dispose of the recently slain infected bodies. Later, Major West confides in Jim about the larger crisis. One soldier almost ended his own life out of despair, believing there is no future worth living for, particularly without female companionship. Major West's grim solution to the problem is to coerce any surviving women into sexual servitude, claiming it is the only way to continue humanity. Jim is horrified. He attempts to flee the mansion with Selena and Hannah, but the soldiers catch them. Sergeant Farrell, who opposes West's plan, is also apprehended. Both Jim and Farrell are locked up together. Farrell suggests a grim possibility. The infection might never have escaped mainland Britain, so other parts of the world could be safe, imposing a strict quarantine around the British Isles. He believes West's actions are driven by desperation rather than reality. At dawn, two of West's men take Jim and Farrell into the woods to execute them. At the site of a mass grave, one soldier shoots Farrell immediately, prompting an argument between the soldiers. Jim seizes the moment to hide among the corpses. The soldiers cannot locate him and eventually give up, assuming Jim will die out in the forest. However, Jim glances upward to see a distant jet crossing the sky. Realizing that life persists elsewhere, he musters new resolve. While Jim escapes through the woods, Selena and Hannah are forced to dress up in elegant gowns for the soldiers' gratification. Selena urges Hannah to remain calm. She tries to give Hannah sedatives to numb her fear, but soldiers barge in to stop her. Meanwhile, they spot someone scaling the blockade walls in the distance, alerting the men that an intruder, Jim, has returned. Split up to investigate, they never suspect how determined Jim is to fight back. Jim stealthily ambushes the scattered soldiers, returning to the mansion and freeing Private Mailer, the infected soldier chained up for observation. Mailer rages through the grounds, attacking everyone in his path. Jim also eliminates a soldier by surprise. As more troops succumb to infection, Major West arrives back at the chaos, stunned to find most of his men either dead or changed. Selena, who has not been infected, watches in fear as Jim, now covered in blood, enters the mansion and brutally kills a remaining soldier. Unsure if Jim is infected, Selena raises her machete, but Jim speaks softly, reassuring her he is still human. They embrace, and in that moment, Hannah comes in and inadvertently knocks Jim down, fearing he has harmed Selena. Jim clarifies that he is not infected, sealing their reunion. With the mansion overrun, the three dash to Frank's taxi. Major West has hidden in the back seat, shooting Jim in the stomach before Hannah swerves the car to let Mailer, still infected, drag West out of the vehicle, presumably killing him. Hannah drives away with Selena and the gravelly injured Jim. Desperate to save him, Selena and Hannah take Jim to an abandoned hospital, where Selena administers emergency medical treatment. They manage to stabilize him, and Jim passes out. 28 days later, Jim, Selena, and Hannah are living in a tranquil countryside cottage by a wide field near the coast. The infected still roam some roads, but in a weakened state, many of them are succumbing to starvation. Jim, his wounds bandaged, awakens from a restful sleep. Downstairs, Selena is sewing an enormous piece of fabric, while Hannah stands nearby. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a jet engine high above. Racing outside, the three of them spread the massive banner across a field, forming the large word, "Hello." As the fighter jet roars overhead, the three wave frantically. Selena turns to Jim, smiling, and asks if the pilot has spotted them. The scene fades out, and the film ends there. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.